I never imagined that a simple crayon drawing by my autistic son would reveal a truth so profound it would change the course of my entire life. This is the story of a single father, a blind date, and the moment a child's unique perception saw a connection that two adults had completely missed. A story about seeing the world differently, unexpected recognition, and how sometimes love arrives wearing a familiar face. If you stay with me, you'll discover why the most extraordinary moments can begin with a piece of paper, a box of crayons, and a mind that notices what others overlook. My name is David, and for the past 3 years I've navigated the world of single parenthood with my 7-year-old son, Leo, who is autistic. Our life had settled into a careful rhythm until a friend insisted I was ready to date again. She set me up with someone, a woman named Sarah. What I didn't know, as I nervously prepared for that first meeting, was that Leo held a secret. A secret captured in crayon on a piece of paper he refused to let go of that entire morning. Leo's world is one of intricate patterns and profound focus. His autism means he experiences everything with a heightened intensity: textures, sounds, the flicker of fluorescent lights. Social interactions are often a confusing puzzle, but his memory for visual details is extraordinary. If he studies something, he sees it in a way I never could. Our life together since his mother left has been built on predictability. Tuesday is pasta night. Thursday is grocery shopping. Saturday morning is for drawing at the kitchen table with his big box of 64 crayons, the paper taped down exactly how he likes it. He doesn't draw like other kids. There are no stick figures or smiling suns. Leo draws patterns, intricate, repeating geometric sequences that flow from his mind to the page with a concentration that silences the entire apartment. But about a month ago, something changed. We were in our usual grocery store, the one with the quiet aisles he prefers. Leo was pushing the miniature cart he loves, focused on lining up the soup cans on a shelf. And then he stopped. He was looking at a woman restocking the organic produce section. She had dark, wavy hair tied back, and she was humming softly as she arranged bundles of kale. Leo stood frozen, his cart abandoned. This wasn't a meltdown, it was a deep, observant stillness. The woman noticed him, smiled gently, and without a word handed him a single, perfect red apple from her cart. Leo took it, stared at her face for a long moment, and then turned back to his cans without a sound. That was it. A 10-second encounter I would have forgotten by checkout. The following Saturday, his drawing was different. Among his usual fractal spirals, a new element appeared, a careful, recognizable face. A woman with kind eyes and dark, wavy hair. At the bottom, in his blocky, determined letters, he wrote, "The nice lady from the grocery store." My breath caught. He had never drawn a real person before. This wasn't a pattern, this was a portrait. I asked him about her, but he just pointed to the words he'd written, as if the explanation was complete. The drawing went up on our fridge, a silent monument to a moment that clearly meant everything to him. My friend Clara is the reason I was going on a date at all. She'd been badgering me for months. "You're 34, David. You're not just a dad, you're a person. Leo is stable. You deserve a little happiness." I resisted. The idea of bringing someone new into our carefully calibrated world filled me with dread. The explaining, the potential for disruption, the fear of someone not understanding Leo, it all felt like too much risk, but Clara wore me down. She promised this friend of a friend, Sarah, was different. Kind, patient, a pediatric nurse. "Just one coffee," she said. "1 hour. What's the worst that could happen?" The plan was to meet at a cafe called the Maple Leaf, a neutral, quiet spot Clara had vetted. My sister was watching Leo for the afternoon. As I got ready, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. I was adjusting my tie in the hallway mirror when Leo walked out of his room, not with his usual Saturday pattern drawing, but with that asterisk drawing. The one of the grocery store lady. He held it pressed flat against his chest. "Hey bud, I'm heading out soon. Aunt Jenny's going to have a great time with you," I said, kneeling to his level. He didn't respond to my words. He just looked at me, his expression serious and unreadable. Then slowly, he held the drawing out toward me. "For me?" I asked, confused. He nodded once, a firm, definitive motion. He wanted me to take the drawing with me. Okay, I said softly, my heart aching with a love I couldn't fully articulate. I'll keep it safe. I carefully slid the folded paper into the inner pocket of my jacket, right over my heart. It felt like I was carrying a piece of him, a talisman. He watched me do it, and only then did his posture relax slightly. The car ride to the cafe was a blur of nervous rehearsal. Hi, I'm David. I'm an architect. I have a wonderful 7-year-old son named Leo. I patted my jacket pocket, feeling the crinkle of paper, Leo's quiet vote of confidence. The cafe came into view, a cozy brick building with large windows. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked toward the door, my mind racing with scripts and scenarios. I pushed the door open, the bell jingling overhead. And there she was, already seated at a corner table by the window looking down at her phone. She had dark, wavy hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked up as I entered, offering a small, tentative smile. My feet carried me forward on autopilot, but my brain had just screeched to a halt, because I knew her, not from a friend's description or a blurry online photo. I knew her from my son's drawing, from the quiet produce aisle, from the portrait on my fridge. The smile, the eyes, the specific way a strand of hair fell beside her cheek. It was her, the nice lady from the grocery store. Sarah was the nice lady from the grocery store. I stood frozen a few feet from her table, the world tilting on its axis. My hand moved unconsciously to my chest, to the pocket holding Leo's drawing. He hadn't just given me a picture for comfort. He had given me a message. And in that earth-shattering second, I realized my profoundly autistic, mostly nonverbal son had recognized the woman I was about to meet, before I ever even knew her name. Time didn't just slow down, it fractured. The ambient noise of the cafe, the clatter of cups, the murmur of conversation, drained away into a silent, rushing vacuum. All I could hear was the deafening hammer of my own heart. Sarah's smile began to falter, replaced by a look of polite concern. I was just standing there, staring. "David," she asked, her voice cutting through the static in my head. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I managed to close the distance to the table, my movements robotic. "Sarah," I said, the name feeling strange and momentous on my tongue. "Hi, yes, sorry, it's just been a day." I slid into the chair opposite her, my mind screaming. "First dates are nerve-wracking for everyone," she said kindly, pushing a glass of water toward me. "No judgment here." She was even more striking up close. The kindness in her eyes that Leo had captured with a green crayon was real and palpable. But how was this possible? Clara's friend of a friend set up, and the woman from the produce section. The odds were astronomical. My hand drifted again to my jacket pocket. "So Clara tells me you're an architect," Sarah began, sipping her tea, "and that you have a son." "Leo," I blurted out, the word charged with a new, overwhelming significance. "His name is Leo. He's 7. Clara mentioned he's on the spectrum. I'm a pediatric nurse, so I work with a lot of amazing kids with various needs. It's challenging, beautiful work." A nurse, of course. That explained the calm, observant demeanor in the grocery store. She was used to reading people, especially those who might communicate differently. The coincidence tightened another notch. The waitress came and we ordered coffee, a mundane action that felt surreal. I was on a date with a woman my son had already memorialized in art. I needed to say something. But how? "Hey, funny story, my autistic son who rarely acknowledges strangers drew a picture of you, want to see it?" It sounded insane. We fell into the tentative rhythm of first date small talk. She was 30, had lived in the city for 5 years, loved hiking and old bookstores. She was witty and thoughtful, and with every passing minute, the initial shock was being overlaid by a dawning, profound attraction. But the secret in my pocket was a live wire. About 20 minutes in, during a lull, she tilted her head. "Can I ask you something a little personal?" "Sure," I said, my pulse spiking. "You keep touching your chest, your jacket pocket. Is everything all right? Not a medical thing, I hope." This was it, the opening. I took a deep, shaky breath. It's not medical, it's something else. Something I can't really explain, but I need to show you. I saw a flicker of wariness in her eyes. Please, I added. It's not what you think, it's about Leo. At the mention of my son, her expression softened. I slowly, carefully, extracted the folded drawing from my pocket. The paper was warm from my body heat. I smoothed it on the table between us, my fingers trembling. For a second, she just looked puzzled. Then her eyes focused on the crayon lines. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her gaze darted from the paper to my face, back to the paper. The color drained from her cheeks. That's me, she whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. This is the grocery store, the organic section. How? She looked up at me, utterly confused. David, what is this? Did Clara show you a photo of me? No, I said, the truth tumbling out. Leo drew this. A month ago after we saw you at the store. He's never drawn a real person before. Never. He gave it to me this morning before I left. He insisted I take it. I didn't know why until I walked in and saw you sitting here. The silence that followed was immense. She stared at the drawing, her fingers hovering just above the paper, not touching it as if it were a holy relic. Tears welled in her eyes. He remembered me, she breathed, almost to herself. He saw me for 10 seconds and he remembered asterisk me. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. Do you understand how rare that is? For any child, but especially. I know, I said, emotion choking my voice. I know, his brain works differently. He sees details the rest of us filter out, but this is something else. She traced the air above the careful letters at the bottom. The nice lady from the grocery store, she read aloud. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, giving a shaky laugh. I'm so sorry. This is just a lot. I handed him an apple, that's all. It was a quiet Tuesday. He looked so serious and focused, I just wanted to offer a little connection. You made one, I said. A deeper one than either of us could have imagined. She was silent for a long moment, just looking at the drawing. Can I tell you something? She finally said, her voice low. That was a really hard day for me. My shift at the hospital before that had been brutal, a difficult case. I was feeling completely drained, invisible, like I was just going through the motions, and then I saw your son, his complete, unguarded focus. I gave him the apple on a whim, and when he took it and just looked at me, really asterisk looked at me. For a second, I didn't feel invisible anymore. Her confession hung in the air, weaving our separate stories together. Her moment of quiet despair, met by my son's unique perception, which he then translated into a drawing that now sat between us on a first date. The symmetry was breathtaking. So Clara, I said, trying to stitch the logistics together, how do you know her? Sarah smiled, a real warm smile that reached her eyes. From the hospital, she's a speech therapist. We've worked on cases together for years. She's been trying to set me up for months. I kept saying no. I was burned out on everything, but last week she was so insistent. She said, I know this guy and he has the most amazing kid. She told me about Leo, not as a challenge, but as a point of light, and I thought maybe. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, part relief, part sheer wonder. She played us both. She connected two dots she never even knew were in the same picture, Sarah corrected gently. The rest of the date transformed. The awkward small talk evaporated, replaced by a deep, urgent conversation. We talked about Leo, his strengths, his challenges, his beautiful, labyrinthine mind. We talked about her work, the emotional toll and rewards. We talked about the quiet loneliness of single parenthood and the exhausting cycle of work and recovery. It was no longer a first date interview. It was a convergence. 2 hours slipped away. The waitress had refilled our coffees twice. I learned she was fiercely independent, loved terrible horror movies, and had a rescue dog named Barnaby. She learned I was a hopeless baseball fan, hated cilantro, and that my greatest fear was not being enough for Leo as he grew. Finally, as the afternoon light began to soften, she folded the drawing and handed it back to me with a reverence that moved me deeply. "This is the most incredible gift I've ever been given," she said. "Thank you for showing it to me." "He'd want you to have it," I heard myself say. The certainty of it washed over me. It was true. "I couldn't," she said, though her eyes lingered on the paper. "Please, it belongs to you. It's asterisk of asterisk you." She accepted it, holding it carefully. "Then I have a condition," she said, a new spark in her eye. "I get to give it back to him in person, to say thank you." My heart soared. "He doesn't always react to people the way you'd expect," I cautioned. "He might not even look at you." "That's okay," she said without hesitation. "I just want him to know I saw it, that I see asterisk him." We walked out of the cafe together, the world outside seeming brighter, sharper. We stood on the sidewalk, the unspoken question hanging between us. "This was," I started. "The weirdest and best first date in human history," she finished, grinning. I laughed. "Yeah, that's so. What happens now? This is a pretty unconventional foundation." She looked down at the drawing in her hands, then back up at me. Her expression was thoughtful, open, but with a trace of the same fear I was feeling. The fear of complicating a good thing. The fear of hurting Leo. The fear of this beautiful, bizarre magic dissolving under the weight of reality. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I know I want to meet Leo, not as your date, but as the lady from the drawing. I think, I think we have to start there with him." It was the only answer that made sense. It was also the most terrifying proposition of all, because I was about to introduce the woman I was already falling for to the most important person in my world, and I had absolutely no idea how he would react. 48 hours between that sidewalk and Sarah coming to our apartment were the longest of my life. I was trapped between hope and a deep, protective fear. I'd introduced women to Leo before, during the messy, final years of his mother's presence. He reacted with indifference or distress, his routines shattered by unfamiliar perfume and forced conversation. This felt monumentally different, and therefore riskier. I had prepped him simply. "The nice lady from your drawing is coming to visit." He just blinked, repeated the word nice softly to himself, and gone back to his blocks. When Saturday afternoon arrived, I was a nervous wreck. The apartment was cleaner than it had ever been. Leo was in his favorite corner, assembling a complex mosaic pattern with colored tiles. The drawing was back on the fridge. A knock at the door sent my heart into my throat. Sarah stood there holding a small potted sunflower and looking genuinely nervous. She wasn't dressed for a date. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. "For Leo," she said, offering the plant. "Sunflowers track the sun. I thought he might like the pattern of it." It was a perfect, thoughtful gesture. I led her inside. Leo didn't look up from his tiles. The familiar script of disappointment began to play in my head. "Leo," I said gently, "Sarah is here, the nice lady from your drawing." Sarah didn't approach him. She didn't crouch down and try to force eye contact. She just stood quietly near the entrance to the living room and said, "Hi, Leo, I really like your tiles." She then walked slowly, calmly to the fridge. She stood in front of his drawing for a full minute, just looking. Then she turned to face his corner. "You drew me," she said, her voice clear and calm. "Thank you. It's the best present I've ever gotten." Nothing, no response. He placed a blue tile next to a yellow one. The silence stretched, thin and painful. I saw a flicker of sadness in Sarah's eyes, quickly masked by understanding. She gave me a small, resigned smile that said, "It's okay, I get it." And then Leo moved, not toward her. He stood up, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out his beloved oversized book of geometric patterns. He carried it back to his tile area, sat down, and opened it to a specific page. He pointed to a complex interlocking design, then looked directly at Sarah, a fleeting, intentional glance, and tapped the page. Sarah's breath caught. She took a few careful steps closer, just enough to see the page. "A Penrose tiling," she said, her voice filled with awe. "It's non-repeating. You can't predict the pattern." She looked from the book to his half-finished tile mosaic, which echoed the same chaotic order. "You're building one." Leo made a small, affirmative hum, his focus returning to his tiles. That was it. That was the entire interaction. But in the language of my son, it was a thunderous conversation. He had acknowledged her. He had shared his interest. He had asterisk connected asterisk. Sarah understood. She sat down on the floor not too close and just watched him work. She didn't speak. She just coexisted in his space. After about 10 minutes, she said softly, "The blue one might go there," pointing to a spot in his evolving pattern. Leo paused, picked up a blue tile, and placed it exactly where she'd suggested. A tear rolled down my cheek. I turned away to compose myself. In that moment, the last wall around my heart crumbled. She didn't just asterisk accept him, she spoke his language. The visit lasted an hour. She left as gently as she'd arrived, promising Leo she liked his sunflower. He didn't say goodbye, but he did wave, a small flick of his wrist by his side. After the door closed, I found him standing at the window, watching her walk down the street. That night I called Clara. I was crying, laughing, a mess of gratitude. "What have you done?" I asked. "I connected two good people," she said simply. "The rest is up to you." And so a new routine was born. Sarah started joining us for Saturday afternoons, not as a date, but as a friend. She'd bring something for Leo, a puzzle, a textured fabric sample, a book on marine life patterns. She never forced interaction. Sometimes she just read her own book while he played nearby. Other times they'd sit side by side, coloring in silence. The connection was quiet, built on mutual respect for space and silence. Meanwhile, my relationship with Sarah bloomed in the stolen moments. Texts that stretched late into the night. Coffee after work while Leo was with his aunt. Long walks where we talked about everything except the miraculous circumstance that brought us together. I was falling in love, deeply and terrifyingly, with the woman behind the drawing. But the real world, with all its complications, was waiting. The first test came from an unexpected direction. Leo's mother, Alina. Our co-parenting relationship was civil but distant. She lived 2 hours away and saw Leo every other weekend. She called one Tuesday, her voice tight. "Leo won't stop talking about the drawing lady," she said, accusation faint in her tone. "Who is Sarah?" I explained as simply as I could about the grocery store, the drawing, the date. The silence on the other end was glacial. "Let me get this straight," she said. "Your autistic son, who struggles to remember his teachers' names, drew a detailed portrait of a stranger, and you're now dating this stranger. David, that sounds convenient or confusing for him. Have you considered he's just fixated?" Her skepticism was a bucket of ice water. It vocalized my deepest insecurities. Was I, in my loneliness, projecting a fairy tale onto a coincidence? Was I using Leo's unique perception to justify what I wanted? "It's not like that, Alina," I said, defensive. "I hope not," she replied, "for his sake." The call ended with a chill. Sarah noticed the shift in me. When I finally shared Alina's doubts, she didn't get angry. She looked thoughtful. "She's his mother. She's protecting him. I'd be worried if she wasn't skeptical." Then she took my hand. "But David, you can't let her fear become yours. We know what's real. Leo knows." The second test was more internal. As my feelings for Sarah deepened, so did the fear of what losing her would do to me and, more importantly, to Leo. He was incorporating her into his world. Her visits were becoming a predictable, cherished part of his landscape. What if we didn't work out? I'd survived heartbreak before, but causing him that kind of disruption, the loss of a person he'd uniquely chosen to let in, felt like an unforgivable sin. I began to pull back subtly, creating emotional distance, canceling a weekend plan, being shorter in my texts. Sarah, with her nurse's perceptiveness, saw it immediately. She showed up at my door unannounced one rainy Thursday evening. "We need to talk," she said, her expression serious but not angry. "You're scared, I am too, but you're letting it decide for us." I broke down. I confessed everything. Alina's call, my terror of hurting Leo, the crushing weight of feeling like this beautiful thing was also a grenade in our carefully ordered life. She listened, then said something that changed everything. You think the risk is me leaving, but the risk is also you pushing me away to avoid that pain. You'd be making the choice asterisk for Leo to protect him from a loss that hasn't happened. Don't you think he deserves the chance to have something good, even if it's not forever? Isn't that what we all get? Her words reframed the entire dilemma. I was so focused on preventing potential future hurt that I was robbing us of present joy. I was treating Leo's heart as too fragile to experience connection, which was the very opposite of what I believed. We decided to move forward consciously and carefully. We also decided it was time for Sarah to meet Alina. It was a summit for Leo's sake. We met at a park neutral territory. It was intensely awkward at first. Alina was polite but guarded, studying Sarah like a specimen under a microscope. The thaw came when Leo, who was swinging, suddenly pointed at a distant oak tree and said, "Pattern." Sarah followed his gaze and immediately said, "Fractal branching. The veins in a leaf, the limbs of a tree, the delta of a river. Same pattern, different scales." It was a direct quote from a documentary we'd watched. Alina looked stunned. She turned to Sarah. You see it too." "I'm learning to," Sarah said honestly. "He's teaching me." That was the moment Alina's defensiveness cracked. She saw not an intruder but an ally, someone who was willing to learn her son's language. They didn't become friends, but a line of communication opened. Respect was established. For a few months, life achieved a kind of breathtaking, fragile harmony. Sarah was seamlessly woven into the fabric of our days. Then, in early autumn, the third and most profound test arrived. It wasn't external conflict or internal fear. It was Leo himself. He began having nightmares, not just waking up crying, but screaming, inconsolable, trapped in terrors he couldn't articulate. His daytime rigidity increased. He started rejecting things he'd always loved, including his Saturday drawing time. The pediatrician found nothing physically wrong. Our safe, predictable world was crumbling and I was helpless. Sarah, seeing my exhaustion and despair, suggested something radical. What if he's trying to process something big, something emotional he doesn't have words for? All this change, me being around, it might be flooding his system. "So what do we do? Ask him to leave?" I said, despairing. "No," she said firmly. "We give him a new way to speak." The next day she arrived with a large professional artist's sketchpad and a set of high-quality, odorless markers. She placed them in the middle of the living room floor and sat down. She didn't call Leo. She just opened the pad and began to draw, not patterns, a story. A simple, sequential comic strip of a small bird learning to fly, falling, and being caught by a bigger bird. Leo watched from the hallway. After 20 minutes he crept into the room. He stood behind her observing. Then he picked up a marker, walked to the other side of the pad and began to draw. He didn't draw a pattern, he drew a door, then another door, then a third, all slightly ajar. And from behind each door a different tangled scribble of color spilled out, red and black and jagged yellow. Sarah looked at his drawing, then at his anxious face. She pointed to the first scribble. "Is that the scary feeling?" she asked softly. Leo nodded once sharply. She pointed to the second. "Is that the loud feeling?" Another nod. She pointed to the third, the jagged yellow, and this one. Leo looked at her, then at me, his eyes wide and swimming with tears. He took a shuddering breath and whispered a word he'd never used in an emotional context before. "Lost." The dam broke. He didn't have a meltdown. He had a release. He crumpled into my lap, sobbing deep, healing sobs, while Sarah gently stroked his back. In that moment, she wasn't just my girlfriend or the nice lady from the drawing. She was the translator who had found the key to our son's silent prison. After he cried himself to sleep, Sarah and I sat in the quiet dark. "He's not scared of you," I said, the realization dawning. "He's scared of loving you, of how big it feels. It's changing his internal landscape and he doesn't have a map." Sarah nodded, tears on her own cheeks. "So we make him one," she said. We were no longer just a man, a woman, and a child linked by a miraculous coincidence. We were a unit facing the storm together. The drawing had been the first connection. But this was the foundation. And as I looked at the woman who had fought her way into the fortress of my son's heart not by demanding entry, but by patiently learning the secret knock, I knew there was no going back. The question was no longer if asterisk we could be a family. The question, as we stood on the precipice of the rest of our lives, was how brave we were willing to be to build it. The map began with colors. Sarah's suggestion wasn't a metaphor. We literally started making maps, feeling maps. We bought a huge roll of butcher paper and taped it to the living room wall. At the top, Sarah drew 3 simple figures, a tall one for me, a medium one for her, a small one for Leo. And then we gave Leo the markers. "Show us," she'd say gently, "where does the red feeling live today?" Slowly, tentatively, he'd approach the paper. He'd draw a swirling red vortex around his figure, or sometimes, a startlingly brave red line connecting his shape to Sarah's. He drew blue calm zones around his favorite corner, black, jagged lightning bolts for the nightmares, and once, a careful, steady yellow line that looped around all 3 of us, binding us together. This became our new language. We didn't just ask, "How are you feeling?" We asked, "What color is it? And where is it on the map?" It gave him control. It gave us insight. The nightmares didn't stop overnight, but their terror diminished. He had a way to evacuate the emotion from his body and put it on the wall where we could all see it and say, "We see that feeling. It's okay that it's there." As Leo found his equilibrium, my relationship with Sarah deepened into something unshakably solid. We weren't just dadding, we were co-piloting. We had difficult conversations about the future, about living arrangements, about finances, about the very real possibility that Leo might never speak in full sentences or navigate the world independently. We talked about it all, without fairy tale promises, but with a steadfast commitment to figuring it out together. The turning point, the moment the maybe crystallized into forever, happened on a Tuesday, an ordinary Tuesday. Sarah had just finished a grueling double shift. I was battling a deadline. Leo was overstimulated from a change in his school routine. The perfect storm. Dinner was a disaster. Leo refused to eat, overwhelmed by the smell of the food. I snapped at him out of frustration. He melted down, a storm of tears and flapping hands. And Sarah, exhausted beyond words, didn't retreat. She didn't look at me with panic or judgment. She just moved. She calmly cleared the offensive plates, opened the windows, and put on Leo's noise-canceling headphones. Then she went to the pantry, pulled out a box of plain cereal, and poured it into a bowl. She set it on the floor in his calm corner, no expectation, no demand. He eventually crept over and ate, one piece at a time. Once he was calm, she came to me where I sat with my head in my hands, feeling like a failure. She put a hand on my shoulder. "We're okay," she said simply. "It was a hard moment. It's over now. We're still okay." In that moment, I didn't see the nice lady from the grocery store, or my girlfriend, or even Leo's gifted translator. I saw my partner, the person who would be in the trenches with me, not just during the miraculous, beautiful moments, but during the mundane, exhausting, messy ones. The person who defined family not as a perfect picture, but as showing up when the picture was falling apart. I proposed 2 weeks later, not in a grand gesture, but in our living room with Leo present. I didn't get down on one knee. I sat on the floor with them, the butcher paper map as our backdrop. I held out a simple silver band. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, "you are our home. Will you officially be our family?" Leo was stacking blocks beside us. He stopped, looked at the ring, then at Sarah's face. He didn't say anything. He just picked up a red marker, walked to the wall, and drew a small, perfect heart around the 3 figures at the top of the map. Then he pointed to Sarah and made his soft, affirmative hum. Sarah was crying, laughing, nodding all at once. "Yes," she whispered, "1,000 times yes." We were married in the spring in the same park where she'd met Alina. It was a small ceremony. Leo was the ring bearer, carrying the pillows with a focused seriousness. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Leo, who had been completely silent, suddenly clapped his hands together once, a sharp, happy sound that echoed like a blessing. Life didn't become a fairy tale. It became real and layered and more beautiful for its complexities. Sarah moved into our apartment. We turned the second bedroom into a sensory haven for Leo. The adjustment period had bumps, his routines shifted, new textures and sounds entered his space. But with the map on the wall and our hard-won communication, we navigated it. A year after the wedding, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place in a way that brought the story full circle. Leo, now 8, had been increasingly verbal, scripting phrases from his favorite shows and books. One Saturday morning, we were back at the grocery store, the same one. Sarah was pushing the cart. Leo was walking beside her, holding her hand, a rarity he reserved for his most secure moments. We turned into the produce section. And there, stocking oranges, was a new employee, a young man with a bright green apron. Leo stopped. He stared. Then he tugged on Sarah's hand and pointed. "Nice man," he said clearly. Sarah and I froze, looking at each other. The words, the context, it was an echo, a powerful, deliberate echo. The young man, hearing him, turned and smiled. "Well, thank you, buddy." Leo didn't ask for a drawing. He didn't need to. He had the words now. He had integrated the experience. He had recognized a moment of kindness, labeled it, and shared it with us. It was proof that the connection he'd made with Sarah wasn't a fluke or a fixation. It was the blueprint his mind had created for human connection. See a person, recognize the kindness, remember them. That night, as I was putting him to bed, he pointed to the framed drawing of Sarah that now hung in the hallway, the original crayon portrait. "First," he said. "Yes," I said, my heart swelling. "That was the first one." He nodded, satisfied. "Now many," he said, and then he closed his eyes. He was right. His world, once a closed system of patterns, was now populated with many. Many faces, many connections, many colors on the map. All because one woman in a grocery store offered an apple without expectation, and a boy with a unique mind saw not just a stranger, but a person worth remembering. Sarah adopted Leo a year later. The process was long, emotional, and supported fully by Alina, who had become a grateful co-grandparent in Leo's expanding world. The day it was finalized, we celebrated not with a party but with a quiet family dinner. Leo presented Sarah with a new drawing. This one didn't have words at the bottom. It showed 3 figures holding hands inside a large, intricate heart. And from each of their chests, a different colored line spiraled out and interconnected in a dazzling, complex pattern above their heads. It was titled, in his now confident handwriting, "Our Pattern." The drawing that started it all remains the most precious artifact of our lives. It's not just a picture of Sarah. It's a testament to my son's profound, unspoken intelligence. It's evidence that love can arrive in the most unexpected packages, recognized first by the heart least likely to be looking for it. And it's a permanent reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary journey begins with a simple act of kindness, witnessed by a pair of eyes that see the world not as it is, but in all the detail and wonder it contains. Our story isn't about a magical cure or a perfect ending. It's about building a family from the pieces you're given, learning new languages of love, and having the courage to say yes when the universe places a miracle in your path, disguised as a coincidence. Leo's drawing didn't just predict my future wife. It revealed the hidden connections that had been waiting for us all along, and proved that the most important things in life aren't always spoken. Sometimes they're drawn in crayon, held close to the heart, and recognized before the mind even knows what it's seeing. So what is the real story here? Is it a romantic fairy tale about destiny and coincidence? Partly. But for me, it's something deeper. It's a story about perception. We walk through our days seeing only a fraction of what's truly there. We filter out the noise, the details, the subtle patterns just to get by. But what if we're filtering out the connections too? Leo's mind doesn't work that way. He doesn't filter, he absorbs. And in that absorption, he found a signal in the noise that I was completely blind to. His drawing wasn't magic. It was superior, focused attention. This experience has changed how I see everything. I look longer. I listen more carefully. I try to notice the details I used to gloss over. Because what if the next big truth, the next great connection, the next moment of profound beauty is hiding not in the grand gesture, but in a detail everyone else missed? What if the people we dismiss as not paying attention are actually paying a different, deeper kind of attention? The world is designed for neurotypical brains. It expects a certain kind of communication, a specific social rhythm. But what wonders are we missing by building only for that one frequency? Leo and millions of minds like his are not broken. They are broadcasting on a different channel. And sometimes, if we're very lucky and very quiet, we can tune in. An apple in a grocery store, a crayon on paper, a look of understanding that needs no words. These are the frequencies of human connection that exist beyond language. My hope in sharing this is that it makes you look twice, at the quiet person in the corner, at the child who doesn't make eye contact, at the stranger you pass in the aisle. There are entire universes of perception happening behind every pair of eyes, universes capable of seeing the threads that tie us together long before the rest of us even know the tapestry exists. Sarah Leo and I are just one family built from one unexpected thread. But our story is a testament to what happens when we make room for different ways of seeing, when we choose to share our table, when we accept that love doesn't always announce itself with words, but sometimes arrives quietly, in a drawing, waiting to be understood. Thank you for listening to our story. If it resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time you saw the world differently. And if you want to join us for more stories about finding connection in unexpected places, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because you never know when the next extraordinary, ordinary moment might change everything. Until next time, keep your heart open and don't forget to look for the patterns.